All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American. I'm your host. I am Clay Douglas. We got a few different directions we're going in today. If you want
1 minute until showtime.
If you want to call in, well, just go to freeamerican.com, make a donation, and stay with me, and we'll get down to it. Just 160 seconds. $33 seconds.
Your show will go live in 5 seconds. 4, 3, 2, 1. Blog Talk Radio. All right. Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another edition of the Free American Hour. Or 2 hours. I am your host. I am Clay Douglas. And what do we? There's a lot of ways that I want to go today. Don't have a guess. Had something else planned. And let's start out with this. The nightmare days, no longer just a bad dream. This from my friend John Maxey, I believe. As horror turns to terror, fear slides into panic, and still we dare not speak the name of the monster poisoning the world with its venom. Attach the word Jew to any of the many contrived disasters and unfathomable atrocities now overtaking the public mind of the world, and people still pretend to be horrified that you could commit such a grievous breach of social conduct. Their faces twist into a sour clinch, and they turn away in calculated disgust. But deep down, their being horrified only masks the deeper fact that they're terrified of how things have slid so swiftly into the calculable end of their own lives. All my life, I always thought we were supposed to feel sorry for the Jews for everything that happened to them during World War II, the Holocaust, and all that. An otherwise conscious friend told me the other day, "Now you're telling me this?" He said with shocked amazement. "It's not what we've been taught. I don't know what to think." I watched his horror turn to terror
as I told him the real story. Think about your own upcoming premature and unnatural death, I suggested. The process is already well underway and it is irreversible, I added calmly. He flinched. When I told him Jews had seized control of the world in 1649 when Cromwell killed the King of England and then cemented that control with the American public, with the American and French revolutions of the late 1700s, his eyes went wide. When I told him that a vapid neocon stooge just the other day in Washington admitted that false flag deceptions had triggered both world wars, as well as Vietnam and the Civil War, and suggested we do more of the same to start the well-planned war with Iran, his nose squinched up like he was smelling a dead skunk in the middle of his own mind. How could I not have known this, he squawked. It's one of the great public relations scam of all times, I told him, to convince everyone that they were the greatest victim of all time, concealed the real fact that they are the greatest victimizers of all times. He shook his head in cognitively dissonant denial, looking for some place to turn, but finding none. But how come nobody talks about this? With all the stories about what's going on and everybody being a journalist now, why haven't they told us about this? He bleated. Why indeed? The image of gigantic fangs about to bite your head off is no longer a bad dream, but a real-time nightmare in the world's shiny day that turns even the sunshine sour. The taste of metal that forms in your mouth is no longer just a result of the foul medications melting in your bloodstream and forming foul taste in your tongue. It is the odor of true terror, the undeniable reality of our own times and this present moment. As new disasters and atrocities overwhelm the public mind, 99% of public media continue not to use the word Jew. There are two simple reasons for this, easily understandable. All these finely produced media efforts, pretending prescience in analyzing the world's woes, if not owned outright by Jews, are surreptitiously sponsored by Jews. That is why these websites and magazines and video makers cleverly omit the use of the word. Plus, we've been convinced that Jews deserve our pity for the misfortunes they have endured. As part of the story they always leave out is that they created those misfortunes exactly for this purpose. Like distracted Americans who look the other way at the U.S. government's continuing mass murder of innocent people around the world, perverted puppets dance mindlessly on Jewish strings, the would-be analysts who describe all these vicious police shootings and medical conspiracies are working for the Jews, whether they realize it or not. Promoting fear and convincing us there is no solution. In any case, they never use the actual word, only the vague synonym which distances Jews from their many crimes against humanity. You can look it all up in the Talmud, the Jewish holy book, except they've edited out the really good stuff that appeared in the 1929 Cicino edition, especially that part about how all the Jews are ordered to kill or enslave every non-Jew in the world because it's their holy duty according to their divine God Yahweh, who, by the way, I will be talking about later on in the show. Christians and Muslims follow along this holy path, most not realizing that killing your enemies is precisely what the Jews have taught them to do. Like a monster from the far horizon suddenly looming over your living room on the TV comedian Jon Stewart Leibowitz makes you laugh at the notion that these ugly little nibbishes could be a danger to anyone, never mind the whole world. Like the Washington Post railing about Muslim terror about to invade your neighborhood never mentions how the Jewish pharmaceutical companies are now putting RFID chips into all the pills to make sure you take your medicine, and the Jewish doctor smiles as he tells you the AMA now recommends all people over 65 should take statins, without mentioning that they will accelerate the rotting of your kidneys. Like the TV network Scions, who always pair a handsome black stud with a fawning white babe in both their ads and their newscasts, they never mention the epidemic of half-breed babies with bitter white mothers and absent black fathers dealing drugs on the corner and fouling the schools and welfare lines with their angry progeny bent on wreaking revenge for their moribund predicament. And all the while dependent on Big Brother for their sustenance, which they demand is their right, never once thinking about things like freedom and self-determination. Who needs freedom and self-determination when you have a government check on a regular basis? That means you don't have to work, only shuck and jive to the latest trend of gangster rap and stylish rape. Once upon a time, I thought Jews were just another unobtrusive ethnic group who had the bad luck of being caught in a war and suffered from being in the wrong place at the wrong time. Then I listened to the real Germans who told me what they had tried to do, just build a functioning country and deport the saboteurs. But America built the whole mystique about conquering this ultimate evil, the Nazi terror threat, for half a century. Americans have extolled the valiant heroism of the greatest generation. Guess who wrote all these stories? Lost in the continuing hoopla about gas chambers and lakes of fire is the story of Eisenhower, whom some call our last reasonable president because he warned of the creeping danger of the military-industrial complex, but whose exploits of starving to death 2 million Germans in a field in France after peace had been declared by the conquering bombers is conveniently forgotten. Guess who suppressed those stories? Now we have two presidential candidates, a man with no verifiable history who promises a free lunch to the eager refugees who sneak across the border, and a man who put millions of Americans out of work with his ever-growing assets secreted in banks around the world. Each of these men are utterly surrounded by dual Israeli-American citizens, paying them millions to do their bidding as they prepare to pick up the starved cadavers of the people they promised to protect. Too bad you never woke up and used the right word, because it was so politically incorrect and not suitable for polite company. The choices cost you your life and the lives of the ones you love. If you don't believe this, look at the black blight on the leaves of all the trees, and observe the spreading lesions on your skin and the increasing malfunctions in your gut and bloodstream. Contemplate the twitching cockroaches now scrambling around in your mind, and ask yourself, who put them there? Right. We'll put that up on my Facebook page, Free American 69, and let's check and see if we've got any live people in the chat room. Well, interesting. Upstairs is there. Paul Petty. Hello, Paul. How are you? And I was reading something by John Kaminsky from his new website. You know, Paul, you should probably call in, because I never did get an update on your Freedom Palooza rally. Never heard how you did on that. But let's see what else we've got. Let's see what else we got. Through that. Okay. I want to talk about prehistory today. And as you may or may not know, I have wrote a book about that, regarding the gods and the gods and devils and demons and heroes. It's called Meet Lucifer. And I'm going to share some of that story with you shortly. But before I do that, I want to share some excerpts from a book by a noted archaeologist, traveled all over the world. His name is Jonathan Gray, and he has been on my show quite a few times. Hello there, Scumly. Guess what? I'm not talking to you, Rabbi Rick. I know who that is. That's Scumly from Florida. So, you got anything to say before I kick your ass, you scumbag? That's this is we've got some real people on here. Paul Petty, for instance. Well, there you go. He ran. Rabbi Rick ran. Most of your trolls are cowards. They don't use your real name. They don't deal with you. And he's probably Jewish, since he chose Rabbi, and they're the ones that want to call everybody else a Jew. All right. I promised you 10,000 years of history. Let's do that. At the time, Professor Martin Byron was in Melbourne, Australia on a scientific lecture tour. He had just stepped under the shower when a sharp tingle sent him scurrying to his bedside phone. Pasadena, California. Martin, there's been another sighting of the Black Knight. The NASA men are calling for details. Kazanskiv in Moscow is pushing for an immediate expedition to the vicinity. We want you back as soon as possible. Byron set down the receiver so it was on again. Not sighted for 20 years, but now he snatched up the mouthpiece and dialed another number. I was still some 15 minutes away from Byron's hotel apartment, which afforded time for reflection. It was, I recalled, in October 1957 that man's most daring triumph, Sputnik 1, had been rocketed suddenly into orbit 584 miles above the Earth. With excitement mingled almost with disbelief, millions worldwide had scanned the night sky to glimpse that shining artificial moon skimming on its path east to west against a canopy of stars. Within 4 months, America had followed suit. So after eons of tortoise-paced development, humanity had suddenly leapt off the planet. It was startling, and we were alive to see it. Then came a bizarre discovery. It was hushed up quickly, I recalled. I was now at Byron's hotel, the ignition key off. I sat musing as tracking stations swung into action to monitor these new moons. The night sky had tossed up an awesome mystery. Another satellite was discovered already in orbit. Certainly it was neither American nor Russian, and the uncanny truth was nobody else had the technology. French astronomer Jacques Vallée of the Paris Observatory saw it 3 times in 1961 and got 11 data points in 45 seconds. It seemed to be orbiting in reverse at an altitude of over 22,000 miles above the Earth. Experts were jolted. Who put this satellite into orbit? How long had it been there? I'm glad you could come, smiled the professor at Jonathan Gray, offering a chair. Now there's something for your research. I might say the Russians have the edge on us in this investigation. Lev Dentales and Pulkovov Observatory in Leningrad concur that the Black Knight is out there waiting for us to explore its cargo, and God only knows, whatever we find aboard may change the course of history. I shuffled intently. So you believe this is an intelligently placed vehicle? Well, it's not a meteor, and you can rule out space junk. Truly, the last 25 years had plunged us into some unsettling discoveries concerning our unknown past. I reminded Byron of that day in February 1961, the 13th to be exact, when Mike Mikesell, Wallace Lane, and Virginia Maxey were exploring 4,300 feet up the California's Coso mountains and stumbled upon a fossil-encrusted rock. That in itself was not unusual, but wait for this. Expecting it to be a hollow geode stone containing crystals, they broke a diamond saw on it the next day. The surprise turned wild when instead of crystals, they find inside the rock a mechanized device resembling a spark plug. A sophisticated relic, if you please. But the riddle was its enormous age. Authorities dated it at 500,000 years. Do you see the problem, I ask? Even if we dismiss such dating, the mystery object was undoubtedly far too old to be explained by our conventional theories. The professor grinned. He was clearly enjoying the puzzle. Discoveries such as these do pose some awkward questions, he chuckled. Tell me, Martin, scientifically speaking, is it possible that things which ought not to exist do in fact exist? Could there have been a remote era when man-made wonders were as commonplace as they are today? Gradually, the pieces seemed to be fitting together. I was beginning to wonder that if something very big had happened on this planet in the past, something so big it wiped out traces of just about everything from the face of the earth except for a few clues upon which we were now stumbling. I can imagine what you are thinking at the moment. You're probably intrigued but skeptical, right? Prehistoric man could never have produced such things as Earth-orbiting satellites and spark plugs. Yes, I know. The 19th century evolution theory was hammered into us as school children and is still taught in all the places of learning. The story goes that we ascended from savages to our present civilized state by slow, uninterrupted development. The question now arises, could this be a myth? But hasn't evolution been proved? Good question. The truth is, evolution has always been only a theory. Yes, it is often presented as fact, even though it is impossible of any really positive proof. Would it surprise you to learn that not in one spot, but all over the world, impossible ancient inventions have been surfacing of late, and some of them show a technology as advanced as our own? Did you know that nearly all writings of ancient people worldwide tell the same story, that of a decline from the original golden age, that a cataclysmic disaster wiped out the advanced world? Now here's the crunch. Today's diggings all over the globe show that these traditions tally with fact. Enormous stone masses or metal fragments are there. They cannot be argued away. This is tantalizing. Actually, the concept of an advanced original world, which gave impetus to all succeeding civilization, is well within the framework of scientific thinking. What is more, I believe this to be such a credible reality that no longer can we evade it. The story begins to unfold concerns a technology whose citizens were rich beyond our dreams. I shall show you how a global flood minced it into atoms, how subsequent attempts were made to revive the lost glory, and how a fiery holocaust intervening, most of the survivors became savages. It's time the truth was out. So many theories have been foisted on so many people for so many years. We never know all the facts, but there's enough to ignite an explosion in conventional circles. When you consider we are stripping bare our secret past, our own early days on planet Earth, our very own family history. It grows exciting indeed. I suspect the evidence progressively interlocks. You may sense the swelling excitement of one who suddenly touched down upon some unknown new planet. Okay, and another quick look into the chat room. Hey, Rabbi Rick, I won't take your call, you asshole. I know who you are. Go away. Yeah, the asshole tried to call my cell phone. That won't work. All right, where are we here? Again, when you consider we're stripping bare our secret past, our own early days on planet Earth, our very own family history, it grows exciting indeed. I suspect that as evidence progressively interlocks, you may sense the swelling excitement of one who has suddenly touched down upon some unknown new planet. The discoveries are explained in everyday language in order to kindle interest within the vast population. It's a tale of vast riches, forfeited, forgotten, and found. There's something ominous here. We have, early in the 21st century, awakened to find ourselves in the superculture arena. As we leap to new, unimaginable heights, we suddenly come eyeball to eyeball with our past, awakening to the realization we've been here before. And folks, this is one of the things that I'm talking about in this show, and probably tomorrow's show as well. I've told you that sometimes I don't know. I write science fiction, thought I was writing science fiction. Thought I was writing science fiction, but the more I think about it, it's like I'm delving into memories that may be thousands of years old, maybe memories that are embedded within our DNA, and some of us can access those. Because I wrote stories about that now go along and predate this whole ancient aliens theory that Eric von Daniken wrote, and I read when I was 14 years old. And this Jonathan Gray, an archaeologist who traveled all over the world investigating these phenomena. He's been on my show before, and he's done a book on it, and I am sharing that book with you now. He says, as we leap to new unimaginable heights, we suddenly come eyeball to eyeball with our past, awakening to the realization that we've been here before. Last time as now, the world scene was overshadowed with violence and corruption. The end was almost total annihilation. One is tempted to ask, might something like this happen again? Could a holocaust of be looming of such proportions it will parallel the first wipeout? We might be better able to evaluate this question at the close of our probe. Meanwhile, our excursion into the past offers a feast of hidden delights. Let's begin with part one, how an original superworld vanished. Again, this is a book written by Jonathan Gray, archaeologist. And yeah, we got some interesting people in here. To Unearth, who may be Lynn, except she won't identify herself or contact me, so I don't know if it's Lynn or not, but I'll let her stay anyway. Dr. Decharge, who I do know is real, David Kosh. Don't know who General Custer is, and I'm wary of anybody that wants to use a bunch of fake names. Henri Old Fart, he's been here before. Paul Tabetti is here, cyanide. And Ufda. Of course he is. Got imposters in the chat room. That's just standard for the course. Now, this is what I find interesting about Jonathan Gray. His chapter 1 is fiction. His chapter 1 is fiction. The day the earth tipped over. David, you may enjoy this because you think it's going to happen again. I don't know, and I don't hold my breath. But I approach this by writing fiction also. In my Lucifer series, I'm writing fiction. At least I thought it was when I wrote it 45 years ago. Jonathan Gray's book had just come out this last year. And his first chapter is fiction, but it goes on to be something much, much more. Yeah, good morning to Unearth, whoever you are. Good morning. If you don't want me to, if you don't want to contact me, if you don't want to give me a number, if you don't want to contact me on my cell phone, which is 512-767-4561, then you're not the real to Unearth, then you're not the lady that was a very, very good friend of mine. Maybe you're just another imposter now. I don't know. David still contacts me, and through my cell phone and through my Skype. And the last person I talked to from so-called To Unearth, why do you want to talk to me? Well, because you're a friend. Well, you can call me. No, I can't. I have had a computer crash 2 or 3 times, and I don't have your phone number. The only way I've got is if you send me a text message or call me on my cell phone. And if you don't want to do that, well, then you're just another troll. Okay, you got some identification there. Yeah, that's good. But I still can't talk to you, I still can't contact you, so you might as well just be another troll. Don't matter to me. Don't matter tomorrow. Anymore. Okay. Let me do something here. Couple of things here. What's going on here? Sorry about that. Computer has gone bonkers on me. Alright, got no idea what's happened here. Hang on a minute. We'll try to find it. Alright, let's continue with the fiction segment, Chapter 1 of Dead Men's Secrets. Sam stormed outside. Anna was such a sucker for cranks. That guy at the news interview, a world wipeout, what rot. Why couldn't Anna be practical like he was? Sam had built up this market garden from scratch, 16,000 pineapple, the best in the southern polar basin. How that clever little blackmail, well, Anna didn't know about that, but they'd soon be rich. The Hoover bus whirled into busy Ada Avenue and disgorged its load outside the Green Pyramid Hotel. Sam's favorite bar was ablaze with color. Inside at a corner table sat an acquaintance from the electronics plant. Sam was still fuming at Anna's gullibility. He poured out his frustrations over a beer. So I told her, Mal, if a worldwide flood were imminent, surely our top scientists would say so. When has nature let us down? Since the time began, it's been so smooth. Natural disasters, pure fantasy, Mal. They just can't happen. They do, drawled his companion. When this mug is empty, that's a natural disaster. Sam winced at the flippancy of their remark and proceeded. Anna said, the end's coming, Mal. Have you heard anything so naive that this entire planet from from pole to pole will suddenly change under a flood of water? Mal peered over his flask. How? Oh, some stupid prophecy about sheets of water crashing down from the sky and erupting out of the ground. Religious nonsense, Sam snorted. Perhaps so, responded Mal, but you know, pal, there is enough water up there and down there. He just gestured with his flask. What do you mean? Was Sam hearing right? Was Mal a fruitcake too? Just this, Sam. You know why we have such an excellent climate? Why we have vegetation in such lavish exuberance, with so wonderfully teeming with animal life? Go on. It's that vapor canopy high above the planet. It filters out harmful cosmic rays and keeps our climate just right. But there's oceans of waters up there and lots more in the underground basins. If something were to disturb them... Sam cut in. Rubbish. I'll believe it when the first drops fall. Look, most of Earth's surface is not sea, but land. Watered since time began, and quite adequately, I might say, by nothing but the gentle morning mist. It's reliable, I tell you. What can go wrong? If the Earth keels over, quipped Mal, as I'm about to do. Sam bit his tongue. It was useless trying to extract sense from his companion tonight. He glanced up at the televiewer. The news was on. With police scanners now in 70% of homes, arrests for dissent had risen to 600 per week. A new planet had been detected beyond Pluto. Hoodlums with a laser gun had decapitated a man on his way home. Apparently he disturbed them during a pack rape. Today, a single bomb disintegrated another entire city on the equator. Frightening all this violence, almost out of control, Sam felt sick. Some cool night air, that's what he needed. Sam pushed through the sound-activated doors and into the street. It was soothing, calm, fresh. He felt better. Leaflets from peace demonstrators littered the pavement. Sam watched, bemused, as one flittered above the street and up the side of the half-completed Jared building, already towering 300 feet into the darkness. It was partly his, thanks to photos in a safe deposit box. Blackmailing the corporation chief had been easy. The man could ill afford a fraud scandal. Sam smiled. With his stake in the Jared Corporation, he was set for life. And Anna, that silly woman, he wanted her so much it hurt. Next week was the wedding, a lifetime with her. Suddenly, the pavement rocked. Sam was hurled against a guardrail. He looked up. Massive buildings were swaying. Loud bursts of noise cracked the air. He stretched out his hand to
steady himself and then felt them. Spots. He fumbled for his neck phone, his face ashen. Something like this was occurring on the final night of the antediluvian era, if we are to believe later traditions, that is. As far as the worldwide greenhouse environment, geology would one day attest to it as well as to its sudden demise. Traditions would later describe survivors of the deluge who were like gods, that is, they were members of a superior civilization which ceased to exist after the Great Flood. Egyptian records would contend that the reign of the gods before the first dynasty was one of a superior civilization which ceased to exist after the Great Flood. Egyptian records would contend that the reign of the gods before the first dynasty was one of superior and miraculous powers. After the deluge, the Popol Vuh, sacred book of the Quiche Indians of Guatemala, would record the first race of men before the flood possessed all the knowledge. They studied the four quarters of the heavens and the round surface of the earth. Understood in this light, even Greek mythology begins to make some sense. We can say the recollection of a degenerate race of a vast, mighty, and highly civilized empire in which a remote past covered the world. Pause for reflection. Can we possibly imagine that all the peoples of all continents independently invented such a story? Did they speak of an original golden age by chance, without foundation? Indeed, I'm tempted to ask, if man evolved from beast, then why is it there existed a long tradition of a golden age instead of that of a savage past? Will anyone explain that? Even where there was a lack of writing and conditions of savagery imposed by catastrophe, the same memory of the golden age was passed from mouth to ear. You may want to ask at this point, can we really place much credence in ancient legends? Surprisingly, a great deal. Too often, I'm afraid, we've been prone to dismiss folklore and mythology out of hand, but is this not unscientific, especially since traditions have often led us to discover physical remains? Legends are usually based on a core of fact. Yeah, just like again, we got a bunch of Alright, we'll move on here. Nothing interesting happened in the chat room. Pertinently, William Prescott, the great American nologist, reminds us a nation may pass away and leave only the memory of its existence, but the stories of science it has gathered up will endure forever. You see, folklore is a fossil of history. It preserves history in the guise of colorful tales. Far from being a collection of fables, it is a recital of actual past events, even though from generation to generation some facts have been distorted or forgotten. Professor I.A. Emerov of the Soviet Union cautioned that historians will pay more respect to ancient traditions and folklore. He accuses Western scientists of snobbishness in rejecting the tales of the common people. We must face it, legends are usually based on the core of fact. Take the legend of Troy. No scholar took the Iliad or the Odyssey of Homer as history, but Schillmann, putting faith in it, discovered the mythical city of Troy. The Iliad spoke of a cup decorated with doves, which Odysseus used. In a shaft, Schillmann found that 3,600-year-old cup. Heterodotus told a fabulous story of a distant country where griffins guarded a golden treasure. This land, Altea or Kinshan, has now been found together with the ancient gold mines and decorations from a high culture, prominently displaying the griffin. The vague myth is seen to be fact. The Mexican Indian legends spoke of a sacred well of sacrifice into which maidens and jewelry were hurled. Historians dismissed this as a mere tale until the well at Chichen Itza was discovered in the 19th century. More than any document, the Bible was assailed as a collection of fanciful myths. Yet to the embarrassment of the critics, archaeological discoveries proved time and again that the fabled cities, mythical persons, and their possible events were true and reliable reporting in every detail. Indeed, the Bible can now be regarded as the most accurate and trustworthy source of history we possess. What we have here, according to Jonathan Gray, and according to me, and the articles and the stories that I've written, the novels that I've written, our ancestral memory of a golden era. If we're to credit the collective testimony of all ancient races, man's early history was truly an incredible one. It was a golden age of advanced civilization, of original giants who had superior intelligence and technology. This appears to have been a universal truth known to everyone in ancient times. Sacred records affirm that at the very beginning, soon after the fall of paradise, men possessed extraordinary mental abilities. Beginning with the raw earth, they mastered a high level of civilization in just the first 6 generations of their existence. In that short time, they were able to build cities, play complex musical instruments, and smelt metals. Indeed, with their scientific complexes, these earliest men, it seems, were no fools. You may well wonder to what degree they further developed and refined this technology in the final centuries before the flood struck. Were the miracles of science as common as they are today? A perfectly valid question, I think. Imagine, if you can, paved rainbow cities whose houses of crystal reflected in every spectral hue, and we're talking about air travel, computers, and plastics. Did you know that when Alexander Graham Bell gave us the telephone, he hinted that it had been done before? The old devices have been reinvented, he observed. Yeah, you heard that right. That's exactly what Bell said. In fact, the question was pressed further by the eminent British scientist Frederick Soddy, winner of the Nobel Prize in Physics. He wondered whether ancients might not have attained our present knowledge, but a power hitherto unmastered by us. Now, where did Bell and Soddy get their information? Quite possibly from musty old records. Nevertheless, our quest is not based on ancient texts and reports, but on accepted scientific discoveries. There are recently discovered artifacts that cannot be dismissed, namely objects of metal sitting in museums, unquestionably made in the ancient world, which would have required very advanced technology to produce. A technology not to be repeated until our day.
The weight of evidence grows daily, evidence that all the major secrets of modern technology were known and forgotten long ago. Evidence that early man did create a society that surpassed ours, in all aspects of development. The entire world is really a dead man's tomb, a treasure hunter's paradise. As we prise open the coffin, suspense builds. Slowly, we're lifting the lid on a lost technology from which almost smacks of science fiction. We come face to face with such absurdities as brain transplants, colonies on Mars, and invisible men. We wonder what next. Admittedly, such concepts almost strained credibility. We're tempted to ask, could the ancients have advanced so far? It may help us to consider our own age. As recently as 100 years ago, were not most of today's inventions totally unknown, even unbelievable? Since then, the spawning has been sudden and rapid. What is more, the present age of basic discoveries is hardly at its end. It is forecast that just 15 years hence, our present accumulated knowledge will have doubled. Do you grasp what that means? How then can one possibly conceive of the state of knowledge attained by the antediluvians before the deluge struck? And about that deluge, a world war was raging at the time in the 34th century BC. A catastrophe of incredible magnitude intervened, causing the world to wobble and ripping the crust of the earth to shreds. A great flood swept the whole planet. November 17th, 3398 BC, that was day, probably like most others, temperate balmy. In one longitude, millions were dining, entertaining, relaxing. Exactly at 8 p.m., the earth gave an enormous shudder. Prodded by an outside force, the planet tilted on its axis, and amidst lightning and the worst thunder ever heard by man, the pristine vapor canopy began to disintegrate. A floodgate of water was released upon the earth. There would be no gentle rising of waters. Cosmic forces of horrific violence came unleashed. With a dreadful shock, large land masses with their populations tipped into the sea. The surface of the entire globe became a giant maelstrom in which continents and seas were churned up together. Attended by a screaming hurricane, tidal waves of 6,000 feet swept towards the poles. A blanket of lava and asphyxiating gases extinguished all life. This cataclysm that wiped the mother civilization from the face of the earth and consigned its products to a watery grave forever. Not only were the antediluvian people buried, but their technological advances and achievements were destroyed, including all forms of machinery and construction. It's quite possible that the areas which were most densely populated were submerged by the sea or buried under thousands of feet of debris. It has been scientifically estimated that over 75% of the Earth's surface is sedimentary in nature, extending as in India to 6,000 feet deep. Indeed, the earth, twisted and shaking, was not to quiet down for centuries. With no less than 3,000 volcanoes in eruption, a dense cloud of dust enshrouded the earth, blocking out the sun and distorting the climate for hundreds of years, thus beginning the Ice Age. Of the human race, a mere handful remained. Indeed, their survival was in every sense a miracle. Forewarned, they had salvaged what records they might, a compilation of knowledge which in due course would be imparted to their descendants. Now, for the sake of the listener who is unfamiliar with this event, it should be stressed that the global flood catastrophe is one of the key facts of all history. Not only is there a mass of geological evidence, it has left an indelible impression on the memory of the entire human race. An analysis of 600 individual flood tradition reveals widespread concurrence on essential points. a prior corruption of mankind, a flood warning unheeded by the masses, a survival vessel, the preservation of up to 8 people with representative animal life, the sending forth of a bird to determine the suitability for re-emerging land, the significance of the rainbow, descent from a mountain, and the repopulation of the whole earth from a single group of survivors. Especially remarkable is the persistence of the biblical name Noah, and this is particularly so when you consider the ultimate language differences between peoples and the extreme local distortions which developed in flood areas and flood legends. Yet the name survived virtually unchanged in such isolated places as Hawaii, where he was called Nuyu, and the Sudan Nu, China Nu, the Amazon region Noah, Fiji No, and among the Hottentots Noah and Hagonoth. Think about this. Did each of these nations independently concoct the same name for his flood-surviving ancestor, or did these widely separated people refer back to the same family of survivors? The table of contents of Genesis 10 records the gradual dispersion of Noah's descendants and lists names thus offering clues as to their history and dwelling place. It contends that all nations of the earth have sprung from the family of Noah. Professor W.F. Albright, internationally recognized archaeological authority, describes this in an astonishingly accurate document which shows such remarkable modern understanding of the ethnic and linguistic situation in the modern world. In spite of all its complexities, the scholars never fail to be impressed with the author's knowledge of the subject. So in a nutshell, there's good reason to believe that after the deluge, mankind sprang from a single group of people. Chapters 2 to 6 will confirm that these were not idiots, imbeciles, or illiterates. They were a civilized state with an enormous cultural heritage before they separated. Chapter 5 traces their ultimate slide into oblivion, while Chapters 7 to 9 raise 3 challenging questions that need to be answered. Thus prepared, we shall more intelligently evaluate clues salvaged from the ancient world and exercise to which the modern portion of this work is devoted. Alright, let's see what we got here. Top of the hour.
Well, it's 40 below, and I don't give a fuck about a heater of a truck, and I'm off the rodeo. Get down, man, left it down, man, right, come on, you fucking let me get your rest up right. Get off this goddamn church, you know. Piss me off. Fucking church. You know.
Hello. Who are you? What do you want? Speak English or get the fuck out of here. Alright, what do we got? What do you got here? What do we got here? And so Manny's back in the chat room. And don't see anything of interest here. You know what? Kiss my ass, Manny. See ya. Hello, who are you? What do you want? I don't know who in the fuck you are, and I don't know who your girlfriends are. I have no idea who your girlfriend is. I have no idea who you are. Oh, you're an idiot. Goodbye. Okay. Just jumping in on the cell phone. And see who else can I kick here. How about you? Junk in trunk. Alright. Yeah, let's go on here. You know, we're still recording here. Took a break here to answer a few calls. Won't make that mistake again. I am taking, I am open to donations. Love to have you here. Love to have, you go to freeamerican.com to make a donation. And let's see what else. A couple other things here that I want to get up here and save. Alright, we're doing that. And let me copy that, put that up here so I've got that for later. Alright, where are we going to go from here? Well, let's flash back to Jonathan Gray, chapter 2 here. Quick jump, shrieked Ed. Get in, will you? His jeep door was flung open. I glanced back hurriedly. A fierce-eyed mob was closing the gap. It had happened so fast, camera strung, I was exploring a fertility temple near Calcutta. To stumble upon a sacrificial blood rite was, to put it mildly, unexpected. Some hawk-eyed watcher raised the alarm in seconds. I was the focus of an inflamed pursuit. The foremost devotee was now so close you could hear him panting. A quick sideward glance the glint of a raised knife persuasion enough, I leapt into the moving vehicle that screeched into top gear and flew. Hours later, my heart still pounding madly, but with the excitement. But now the excitement had shifted. 4 bizarre coincidences were startling enough, but a 5th was a world-shaking event soon to break, affecting all of us. I'd been pondering some old prophecies which declared the end of modern civilization to be already known. The prophecy had claimed credibility on the basis of a certain past event. Naturally, before one can begin to consider such prophecies seriously, it must at least be established that the ancient event in which they are linked did in fact occur. I knew Ed Savage to be the bulldog of an archaeologist. Even so, his announcement startled me to no end. That evening, I quizzed him over vegetable curry and iced mango juice. Putting it simply, he began, the commonly held view is that we came from savage Stone Age beginnings. It was a slow but steady development to civilization. He wiped down from his fingers. Well, naturally, I expected on-site investigation of the very first cultures to verify this fact, but what really emerged was something quite different. The coincidence in each case is simply this. All cultures began suddenly and fully developed. A long preliminary period is not supported by archaeology. But, I faltered, groping for words, before cities on earth, he continued, there was nothing, I tell you, a clean slate. Are you telling me the evidence points to no transition whatsoever between ancient civilizations and any primitive forebears? Precisely. They did not rise to their peak. They were at their peak from the beginning. Hogwash, I snapped. There has to be some trial and error, refinement, evolution. Edgar went on. At first I could not believe it either, but there was one pattern, the sudden appearance of civilizations worldwide. 5 coincidences or one pattern, call it whatever you like. Meaning? I looked at him. Well, there was Egypt about 3000 BC. Egypt sprang into existence, suddenly fully developed, that is, without any transition from a primitive state, with a fantastic, ready-made high society, great cities, enormous temples, he continued, pyramids of overwhelming size, colossal statues with tremendous expressive power, luxurious tunnels and tombs, splendid streets flanked by magnificent sculptures, perfect drainage system, a decimal system at the very start, a ready-made writing already perfected, a well-established naming system in which each pharaoh had as many as 5 names. Society had already divided into specialist classes, an army, civil service, and hierarchy, and minutely organized. A court exhibiting all the indications of well-defined precedence and form. Edgar stirred his dish. In the remotest period of which there are records, I tell you, Egypt shows a level of civilization that is inexplicable. It sounds crazy, I know, but it's a fact. I emptied my glass without tasting it and poured another. What if? Go on, said Edgar. I forget. I need a stroll in the night air. Outside was cold black, almost eerie stillness. Above, the Milky Way floated brilliantly close. A warm, gentle breeze brushed my face. My mind wafted back. Inexplicable, he said. Inexplicable unless. Suddenly it flashed. That's it, I heard myself shouting, glad nobody could hear me. Yes, it's inexplicable unless Egypt received her heritage basically from somewhere else. Egypt came from a clearly established civilization. Triumphantly, I strode back in. Ed politely heard me out. So, she got it from someone else, eh? The archaeologist ran a finger on his collar and swallowed. Just who was Egypt's invisible mother? I have to admit, it stopped me for a moment. It wasn't only Egypt, he went on. Take a look at Samaria. The appearance of around 3000 BC of Sumerian civilization was likewise sudden, unexpected, and out of nowhere. H. Frankfurt Telequer called it astonishing. Pierre Amit Elam termed it extraordinary. A. Parrot Sumer described it as a flame which blazed up suddenly. Leo Oppenheim, ancient Mesopotamia, stressed the astonishingly short period of civilization had risen. Joseph Campbell, The Mask of God, summed it up this way: with stunning abruptness there appears in this little Sumerian mud garden the whole cultural syndrome that has long since constituted the germinal unit of all high civilizations of the world within reach. Ed crumpled a napkin on his plate. There's your second coincidence, but I've also been examining the evidence unearthed in Harappa and Mohenjo-daro, Ed stated. They were the key centers of the Indus Valley civilization. Those also appear to have sprung up with no clear-cut traces of having evolved from primitive beginnings. Your third coincidence. The archaeologist opened his mouth and closed it again. Perhaps I've got an overwrought imagination, he said carefully. But there's one possibility I must explore. You think some explosive unknown event might lie behind all of this? You see, the Maya of Central America are in it too. The Mayan calendar goes back to approximately the same time, 3000 BC. And sure enough, at the onset of Mayan culture, their script was already perfect. Another bombshell. I rose and leaned against a plaster wall, studying the evidence sign. 4 very odd coincidences. You said there were 5. Indeed, there are. The megalith builders of northwest Europe appeared at precisely the same time. The achievements they demonstrated were identical, that is, the simultaneous discovery of the Pythagorean triangles, a precise calendar, a true compass bearing for north, knowledge of the movement of celestial bodies, possibly including the knowledge that the world was round, and a minutely accurate system of measurement. Well, John, there's no disputing the facts. Just wish I had an answer. The next day, Edgar was Nepal bound, and one thing seemed sure. Our next meeting would be memorable. That night, I couldn't sleep. My head was throbbing, the mystery deepening me. How was all this possible? So many instant civilizations. I took a map, encircled those suddenly appearing ready-made cultures, and stared at them. Was there any connection between them? I began to sift every available isolated piece of information. Over the next few months, the search would lead through scores of countries. Meanwhile, in the back of my mind, the thought kept surfacing. What of the prophecies? Something told me there was a connection, though I knew not where. As for a possible link between the instant civilization, 8 clues emerged. Symbols in hieroglyphics is number 1, identical worldwide, bore the marks of a common heritage. Everywhere, the swastika, the snake, and sun combinations, as well as numerous specialized and intricate glyphs, were repeated with no chance of coincidence. Likewise, similar systems of writing were in use, again all over the globe, even on isolated islands. This was striking. And languages had similarities. The older they were, the more they resembled each other. Practically all languages have connections through both vocabulary and construction. In almost every language there are many words containing similar root words or combinations beyond what mere chance would allow. Take, for instance, the names of the constellations. I found these were substantially the same, whether in Mexico, Africa, or Polynesia. The calendars of Egypt and faraway Peru both had 18 months of 20 days and a 5-day holiday at year's end. I took into account the great similarities in buildings, not only in the construction but in astronomical alignments. Sphinxes in Egypt and Yucatan, pyramids on every continent and on remote islands, monoliths and stone circles also worldwide and often quarried elsewhere in the world. I was struck by similarity even as to the original purpose. The Tower of Babel was built, according to Josephus, first-century Jewish historian, to provide shelter should another deluge destroy the earth. And regarding the Toltec pyramids, the Mexican chronicler states, after men had multiplied, they erected a very high ziggurat, which is today a tower of great height, in order to take refuge in it should the second world be destroyed. Now I ask you, without a common source, why should the purpose be identical in Babylon and Mexico? Customs again were similar in burial, mummification, circumcision, or in binding babies' heads to produce an elongated skull. That was the Mayans, Incans, Celts, Egyptians, and Basques. Forms of religious observance bore more striking similarities. And finally, I added to the list worldwide traditions of early histories, traditions of a Garden of Delight, a Golden Age, a Golden Flood, one original language, a tower where sudden language confusion resulted in dispersal. Clearly those bore the marks of a common source. Of one thing I was certain, the origins of cultures were so different and so widely dispersed, could not be wholly explained by borrowing and imitation. The Russian poet Valery Brusov seemed to express it well. At the basis of the oldest cultures of mankind, we must look for a single influence. We must look back beyond antiquity for an X, for a still unknown cultural world that set the engine we know in motion. The Egyptians, Babylonians, Greeks, and Romans were all our teachers, but who were our teachers' teachers? My attention was riveted. Here were several fully developed cultures, apparently related, suddenly appearing out of nowhere. How does one deal with such a discovery? I must confess, my curiosity was exploding. One more search was imperative. This time I had to track down the common source of any footprints leading to these cultures. And he's got a chart here showing comparison by Larry E. Arnold of scripts from ancient North American rock art, Egypt, China, Indus Valley, and Easter Island indicates a common origin. Fortunately, after 5,000 years, there were prints still visible, enough to be read. The evidence fairly tumbled out. Language was the first clue. It was soon apparent that root words in almost every language had their origins in the Middle East. Written signs added to the evidence. A single system of signs over an extensive area of the earth by the stone writers originated likewise in the Middle East. Anthropology provided another helpful clue. I discovered the best reconstructions by anthropologists located man's origin as close to the center of the Europe, Asia, Africa landmass. Archaeological finds cinched it. Agriculture has spread all of the world. From where else but the Middle East highlands. In every instant, plants, shrubs, and fruit-bearing trees, basic to survival and advancement, come out of the Middle East first. Botanical and genetic studies confirm the archaeological finds and leave no doubt. There it was. Our beginnings were in the Middle East highlands. I suggested this to Ed Savage when we next met. The first thing he did is throw me a tricky question. So tell me then, how did agriculture begin in the difficult arc of mountains and highlands? Doesn't that make you wonder? Why was it not begun on the fertile, easily cultivated plains and valleys? It was a natural enough question. During my search, I found other scholars expressing surprise at this odd discovery. Have you considered a worldwide deluge? You don't mean Noah's flood, I snorted. Just that. It does shed some light on things. John, don't you see survivors of such a deluge, an event most scholars have overlooked, would still be in the mountains? The lowlands were not dry enough even following the global flood. And did you know biblical sources not only point to Arahat in Armenia as the landing place of the flood survivors, which state they landed in the mountains. Ed unfolded a world map. I elbowed over it on the table. He pointed out pertinent areas. Artifacts uncovered suggest that settled communities extended from the Americas to the west to Thailand to the east by 3000 BC, and overlying there's a proven pattern of high cultures from Spain to Pakistan. I stared, somewhat intrigued, at the map. Armenia, the dispersion point, lay almost precisely in the middle. I would later discover that other researchers had reached a similar conclusion, as says Howells. If we look, first of all, for that part of the world which was the hothouse of the races, we can make only one choice. All the visible footsteps lead away from Asia. Ed, I asked, how could this perhaps be the key to your 5 coincidences? Oh, I hardly think so. How? I recited to Edgar the succession of discoveries made since our last meeting. Each of the first civilizations appeared suddenly, already fully developed. That's Ed's find. A connection existed between them, and their footprints led back to the Middle East mountains. The archaeologist thought a moment, eyes narrowed, working through all the angles. Gradually a smile formed on those weathered lips. By gum, man, you've hit it. The only one thing could explain their high level of civilization. These nations got their heritage basically from the world that was wiped out in the deluge. They continued where the generation of the biblical Noah left off. Those flood survivors must have carried sufficient knowledge of the antediluvian era to give a rapid start to the new cultures that sprang up out of nowhere, and soon after he clicked his fingers. And the timing, 400 years, all it needed. The oldest civilization appeared just long enough after the deluge for the population density to support a culture. Of course, we could hardly claim to be the first. Sir Leonard Woolley notched up a similar observation years before. It was confidently expected that the widely held view of the a gradual development could be proved, but the whole evidence has been to the contrary. Indeed, it has grown to such proportions where we contact the most ancient civilizations, we find the peak was reached soon after the flood. The sudden appearance of civilization is itself a memorial to history's one great catastrophe. More importantly, the flood is a historical event of tremendous testimonial importance to modern man. As in the days of Noah, the world has reached an unprecedented stage of material and technical progress. Then, as now, skepticism, corruption, and violence abound. In ancient prophecy, treat Noah and the flood as the prototype of the sudden and fearful end of the present world. For example, as the days of Noah were, so shall be the coming of the Son. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. For as in days that were before the flood, they were eating, drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took eating and drinking, marrying, and giving in marriage, and until the day that Noah entered the ark, and knew not until the flood came and took them away. So shall also the coming of the Son of Man be. Matthew 24:37-39. Other prophecies project that the first world perished by water, so the second world shall be destroyed by fire. And the second world emerged from the deluge, stripped of its original glory, so
shall emerge from the final fire, a new world cleansed of evil, misery, and death, and restored to a perfection which shall transcend even its original glory. So it goes without saying that the small group of bewildered survivors from the deluge could hardly reproduce all of the aspects of the pre-flood technology. Nevertheless, they would have bequeathed to their migrating descendants the information of which they had personal or recorded knowledge. We know that the very earliest grains showed genetic evidence of sophisticated manipulation. That is, they were already uniform and highly specialized immediately after the flood. In an attempt to reconstruct the antediluvian of technology, the semblance of an integrated world civilization emerged in various parts of the world. Its achievements were astonishing in some spheres, penetrating knowledge which our sciences scarcely began to nudge. I filed the results of my search under C for confirmed and set by the fire, watching the coals on the hearth. It was time to call the jigsaw team together. The year is 1799. The explorer Humboldt is paddling down the wild waters of the upper Orinoco. Formidable cliffs press up on him from both sides. Suddenly he glimpses, etched in the rocks high above, an array of strange messages. Humboldt asked the natives what it means. Their reply is so startling, he almost tips out of his canoe. Exactly 130 years later, Hayel Edam, director of the National Museums of Turkey, is cleaning out the debris in the Topkapi Palace in Istanbul. He comes upon the dusty fragments of an old map. Examination shows that it was compiled by Admiral Piri Reis in 1513 from portions of much older maps. Not until 1956, however, is the map subjected to serious analysis. The Hydrographic Office of the U.S. Navy issues a statement. What it reveals is almost unbelievable. Just 12 years later, Richard Nixon arrives in China. A cultural exchange initiated with America. Interest is awakened in an ancient Chinese document, the Shanghai King. Something like this old manuscript reveals is enough to rock you off your seat. All of these seemingly unrelated events would come together with compelling force by October 7, 1984. On that day, I strolled into the foyer of one Hong Kong hotel for a rendezvous with the jigsaw team. 5 men and 1 woman were converging with results of separate investigation into some very strange recent discoveries. Philip Corduroy was a cartographer. Denise Tagg was a linguist of no mean accomplishment. Paul Heron, a mathematician. Jacob Washman, a keen student of prehistory. And Charlie Perch, a Scotland Yard trained detective who had turned to genealogy more from passion than from pecuniary ambitions. His innate skepticism would render Perch all the more valuable for critical analysis. As it turned out, we would spend 4 days in a tight little suite, advancing the pieces each of us held of the jigsaw puzzle and slowly keying them together until a clearer picture developed. A picture that would prove more startling than any of us had ever expected. Corduroy snapped open his briefcase, withdrew a sheaf of papers, and squinted us over his spectacles. I want each of you to take a gander at these maps. There are 14 of them, all from the medieval and Renaissance period. Corduroy laid them on the table. This one is the Zeno map drawn in 1380. See how accurately it outlines the coast of Norway, Sweden, Denmark, Germany, Scotland, as well as the exact latitude and longitude of a number of islands. Wait a minute, Phil, Heron cut in. The chronometer necessary to determine latitude was not invented until 1765. That's right, said Perch. That's why the readings of Columbus were all inaccurate. However, the Zeno map is most accurate, insisted Carteret. Notice the topography of Greenland is shown free of glaciers as it was prior to the Ice Age. Unknown rivers and mountains shown on the Zeno map have been located in probes of the French Polar Expedition in 1947-1949. What do you think of that? See this photograph? It shows a Chinese map on stone from 1137, formed on a spherical grid. And this is the Camarillo map of 1502, which uses the same spherical grid. And this Camarillo map of 1502, which uses the same spherical grid. Miss Tagg looked agitated. Listen, Phil, in the Middle Ages they thought the earth was flat. Are you certain these are not modern fakes? No chance of a mistake, I assure you. But wait till you see this. Carteret passed around another sheet. This is the Zach map of 1737. It shows Antarctica free. Wasserman interjected. Impossible, Phil. Antarctica's existence was not verified until 1819. Carteret grinned. I expected that. Nonetheless, this map does show that continent completely free of ice to boot. Surprisingly, it's shown not as one continent, but two islands separated by a strait from the Ross to the Weddell Sea, a fact that was not established until the geophysical year 1968. Also shown are islands of the Mid-Atlantic Ridge, and now known to lie at the bottom of the ocean. Now here's a map drawn in 1531 by Artenius Phanusus, in which the dimensions of the Antarctica landmass correspond very closely to those on the best modern maps. The map indicates that the center of Antarctica was beginning to fill with ice when its source maps were drawn. It shows rivers and fjords in Antarctica where today mile-thick glaciers flow. Next, notice this Mercator chart of 1569. It depicts only the Antarctic coast left uncovered by glaciers. I really don't follow you, said Heron. The events you're describing are Ice Age, caveman era, and all that. Yet you admitted these are Renaissance maps. Carteret burst into laughter. That's right. But I think you'll agree that these particular maps are infinitely superior to the regular maps made at that time. Now I'll share a secret. You see, my friends, many of the medieval and Renaissance map makers admitted they were copying from sources whose origins were unknown. These maps are a scientific achievement far surpassing the ability of the navigators and map makers of the Renaissance, Middle Ages, of the Arab world, or any ancient geographers. They are the product of an unknown people antedating recognized history. Now, here's a very exciting map, copied in 1559. The Hajiz Ahmed map shows Antarctica and the Pacific coast of the United States of America with extreme accuracy. It also depicts the land bridge that once existed between Siberia and Alaska. The Andrea Belinsky Casa map, 1508, indicates that northern Europe was covered by the Ice Age glaciation's furthest advances. And here the Anhudi Ibn Banzera map of 1487 notice these remnants of glaciers in Britain and the detailed profiles of islands in the Mediterranean and Aegean Sea. Those islands are still there, but now underwater. The Hami King chart, 1503, indicates the northern Siberian rivers emptying into the Arctic Ocean, but which are now all under ice. It also shows glacier actives in the
actions in the Baltic countries. What are today huge islands in Southeast Asia are known on this map, joined land, which they once were. And you know what? The map even shows an ancient Suez Canal. Ptolemy's map of the north depicts a glacier sheet advancing across south-central Greenland. At the same time, it shows glaciers retreating from northern Germany and southern Sweden. Do you see? This all could have only have come from the findings of survey parties that tracked the regions before, during, and after the Ice Age. You people in the chat room paying any attention to any of this? Or are you off in your own fucking world? Okay, you dumb shits. I started the militias in New Mexico, in the governor's office there, Governor Gary Johnson. Actually, Governor Gary Johnson came to my office in Bingham on one of his trips through. And the ADL gave me credit for putting the militias and starting the militias, or fanning the flames of the militia, with my magazine, The Free American. And that was in 1964. So, as far as I'm concerned, most of you, with a few exceptions, Lynn, thanks for showing me that you're real, Lynn. Still got no goddamn phone number. Got no link, so can't text you. And the rest of you, yeah, General Custer. 321 area code 9. Goodbye, you dumb son of a bitch. Alright, where are we? Alright, where we at here? Yeah, according to Darwin and evolutionary theory, during the Ice Age, humans were grunting savages. The Glorianus map in 1510 shows not only the exact line of the Atlantic coast from America from Canada to Tierra del Fuego, but also the whole length of the Pacific coast. The King James World Chart, 1502, shows the Sahara Desert as a fertile land with large lakes, rivers, and cities, which at a remote period it was. Then there's the Dulcert map of 1339, tracing from Ireland to the Don River of Eastern Europe. I tell you, this map shows precision beyond understanding, but there's one more, it's a beauty. With a teasing twinkle, Corduroy eyed each of us. In turn, rose from his chair and ambled over to the window. He stood there, gazing over the harbor towards Victoria Peak, with its skirt of skyscrapers. He stood there and said nothing. It was those we were no longer with him. Come on, Phil, we're waiting. What's this trump of yours? Corduroy turned, still smirking, and rejoined us. He felt for something in his briefcase and propped it on the table. This is the Piri Reis chart of 1513. After its discovery, Captain Arlington H. Mallory, an American authority on cartography, asked the U.S. Hydrographic Office to examine it. The U.S. Navy, through Commander Larson, subsequently issued this statement. Corduroy took his notes and read it to us. The Hydrographic Office of the Navy has verified that an ancient chart called the Piri Reis map goes back more than 5,000 years. It's so accurate, only one thing could explain it: a worldwide survey. The Hydrographic Office couldn't believe it either at first, but they not only proved the map genuine, it's been used to correct errors in some present-day maps. Corduroy grew excited. I say, if there was ever a treasure map, this is it. It's crammed with priceless gems. It tells the story of ancient coastlines as well as the surprising exploits of our ancestors 5,000 years ago. Piri Reis stated his copy was a composite from 20 ancient maps, so let's explore it. I took a pad and noted the following features. South America and Africa are correct in relative longitude and latitude. Not only were the Caribbean, Spanish, African, and South American coast and correct positions relative to each other, but even a noted land area like the Cape Verde Island, the Azores, the Canary Islands, as well as topographies of the interiors, mountain ranges, peaks, rivers, and plateaus, all were accurately positioned by longitude and latitude. The coastline of the Queen Maud Land in Antarctica, the islands and the bays of the depicted coastline are the same as they appear below the Antarctic ice sheet, as recently revealed by seismic echo soundings. Pictured in great detail are regions scarcely explored today, including a mountain range that remained undiscovered until 1952. Interestingly, the map shows two bays where the modern seismic map show lands. However, when the experts were asked to check their measurements, they found the ancient map was correct. After all, one thing was crystal clear. Either somebody had mapped Antarctica before the ice cap covered the continent, or else the ice-covered continent was mapped with very sophisticated instruments. The Isle of Pines, Andros Island, San Salvador, Jamaica, the mouth of the Amazon, and the island of
Morajo are correctly shaped and perfectly located in longitude and latitude. A major error appeared to be Greenland, shown as 3 islands, but during the International Geophysical Year it was proved that this correctly represented the state of affairs about 3000 BC. Every mountain range in northern Canada and Alaska were recorded on this ancient map, including some ranges which the U.S. Army Map Service did not have on their maps, but the U.S. Army has since found them. The ancient source maps were directly drawn using a circular grid based on spherical trigonometry with the focal point situated in Egypt. The copyist, Reese, unfamiliar with circular projection, shifted and spliced the original grid to compensate for the curvature. Any modern spheroid projection on the flat surface would cause the same distortion. Notice this is an accompanying comparison between Reese and a modern map. Corduroy pressed the point: was this not compelling proof of the map's validity? Clearly it came from an advanced ancient technology, and its grid system is similar to air navigation maps. Even so, we cannot know how many times it was imperfectly copied. Now listen to this, said Corduroy. The Reese projection was based on an overestimate of 4.5 degrees in the circumference of the Earth. Only one geographer in the ancient world had made that overestimation, the Greek Eratosthenes. When the Piri map was redrawn to correct the Eratosthenes era, all existing longitude errors on the map were thereby reduced to almost zero. That can only mean one thing. Do you see? The Greeks who mapped according to Eratosthenes' circumference had before them source maps which had been drawn without error. Thus the geographical knowledge on which the Reese map is based ultimately originated not with the Greeks, but with an earlier people who advanced a more advanced science of map making than even the Greeks. That's brilliant, exclaimed Perch. Couldn't do it better myself. What you're saying is that while Greece and Rome were developing new civilizations, the vestiges of the older one, seemingly worldwide scope, was vanishing. It left these maps, which are partly incomprehensible, so later cartographers altered them. Yes, I can see that. There's one more thing, said Corduroy. The evidence indicates that what we have here is only part of an original world map. He paused, whistled Wasserman. So here it was. Evidence of science at an early epoch which is considered to have had none. Here are physical fragments of the amazing knowledge of a superculture long vanished. We spread out 6 pieces of the jigsaw, facts that were now apparent concerning these early explorers. They possessed a knowledge of the cartography comparable to our own. They knew the correct shape and size of the Earth. They possessed a knowledge of cartography comparable to our own. They knew the correct shape and size of the Earth. They used spherical trigonometry in their mathematical measurements. They utilized ultramodern methods of projection, exact coordinates. They must have had at their disposal advanced geodetic instruments and trained specialists to use them to measure longitude and latitude. Totally lost and not developed in the modern world until the late 18th century. They must have been organized and directed on a global scale. The picture was falling into place was this. Almost 5,000 years ago, someone undertook a survey of the whole planet. The technology at their disposal was very sophisticated. Breakfast next morning in a restaurant off Nathan Road, rice, congee, and fried pastries, different. Watchman had uncovered some little-known data which quite rocked us. Back in our room, he elaborated. Did you know that thousands of years ago, people in India knew faraway England as the island of the White Cliffs? Their Vishnu Purana reveals a close acquaintance with Europe. The geographical contours of the Americas and North Polar Zone are described in detail. That interests me, Jacob. All eyes turned to Denise Tagg. My family was Irish, so I have a penchant for the most ancient Irish legends. And you know what? They agree. They say Ireland was visited by men from India, the Dravidians, who came not as their invaders, but as surveyors. The Maya of Guatemala divided a spherical earth into 5 continents: Africa, Europe, Asia, North and South America, and Australia. And in the 2nd century Greece, Flavius Philostratus wrote, if the land be considered in relation to the entire mass of water, we can show that the earth is the lesser of the two. Now I ask you, how could ancients have known this if they had not traversed and measured the earth's surface? Admittedly, you have a point there, observed Heron. Of course, the earliest Egyptians were knowledgeable about land measurements, and they practiced sophisticated surveying techniques. In fact, they understood enough to influence many other nations in locating important cities and temples on meridians, all based on simple fractions of the Earth's dimensions. It seemed to me that this independent testimony from different races does back up Phil's evidence from the maps. And there's another astonishing document, the 4th book of Shanhai King, entitled The Classic of the Eastern Mountains, from 2250 BC. In it, there were 4 sections describing mountains located beyond the Eastern Sea on the other side of the Pacific Ocean. Each section begins by describing the geographical features of a particular mountain, its height, shape, mineral deposits, surrounding rivers, types of flora. It points in the direction and distance of the next mountain, and so on. It's like a road map. Following the clues, we found that these sections describe in neat detail the topography of western and north and central North America. Each mountain can be identified in each river. I tell you, this document is a geographical survey, but that's not all. It even gives the experiences of the surveyor, from picking up black opals and gold nuggets in Nevada to watching seals frolic in the rocks in San Francisco Bay. They recorded their fascination with a strange animal that avoided danger by pretending to be dead, obviously the native opossum. Now you can read about their wonder at the Grand Canyon, a stream flowing in a bottomless ravine, and a sunrise there. All right, we're out of time. No, I didn't talk about Lucifer yet. I will do that tomorrow. I will talk about my book and the civilization I describe for you that's been hinted to by this team of archaeologists in the book of Jonathan Gray. Dead Man's Secrets. You can get it on Amazon, or you can write me, and I'll pass it on to Jonathan. God bless you all. Thank you for listening. FreeAmerican.com is a way to send a donation, or you can order some of my books, including the book on Lucifer, which I'll share with you tomorrow, at shop.freeamerican.com. Thank you. God bless.
What?